All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And today, I'm just going to be really blunt. We get into a controversial topic about the problem with coaching, the challenges we're seeing in coaching, and a whole lot more. I have a friend of mine, Tony Whatley, on the show, who is an incredible entrepreneur, a king of getting results for himself, delivering, has an incredible story, and also a perspective that I very much appreciate and always speaks truth to my soul. In the beginning of the show, we unpack the problem with coaching, the issues we're seeing, and how you can use that to empower yourself to be a better coach, get better clients, and even hire the right coach. The emotional journey of selling a business and how it's often overlooked. All the ingredients that are needed to really find the person to help you take your business and life to the next level with due diligence, understanding their background, how more information does not always equate to better results in coaching, how coaches should not attempt to guide others through issues that they haven't resolved themselves, which, holy moly, I was sweaty listening to it because it landed, and it landed for a lot of different reasons, myself included, thinking about past mistakes and lessons, how continuous improvement and iteration are vital in coaching and business. And social media is still one of the most powerful marketing tools that's often underutilized and underdone, how it's essential to question and understand the origin of your beliefs and how they show up in your life and show up in your business, how classic literature offers timeless insights into human behavior and challenges. And my favorite point, and a lesson I've learned wholeheartedly, is not everyone is meant to stay on your journey, and it's okay to let go, which reminds me of one of my powerful quotes that a shaman said to me, is that relationships happen for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and the choice isn't up to us. And so this episode is loaded with nuggets, wisdom, and from somebody who not only walks the walk, but talks the talk, and they're fully embodied. So without further ado, let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. Today's guest is long overdue, and I would say probably like 4 or 5 years overdue, because I've been one of his silent stalkers on the internet and really like his Facebook fanboy. But also, I'm genuinely stoked and excited because I feel like he's not a version of me, but he's the version I aspire to be, where he's a little bit more of a liability with a bigger backbone, but also has a perspective of wisdom and experience to back it up. And so I love this. I love this man. I love his perspective. He is a podcast host. He's an author. He's a consultant, runs a mastermind, and we share similar values and jobs where he helps people scale and exit. But what I love about what he says is he helps business owners get what they want. Sometimes it's more money. Sometimes it's recognition. Sometimes it's authority. Sometimes it's freedom. But normally it's a combination, and really helping people live in the deepest level of alignment and falling and leading the charge. And you're never done, and there's no finish lines. There's always room for improvement, whether it's starting powerlifting at 40, starting to skateboard at 50 and bump into Bam Margera as a skate park, but really like genuine that adage of chop wood, carry water, never stop growing, never stop evolving, and never stop chasing your dreams and passions. And he is a breath of experience because he wasn't born into this. He didn't come from money. He side hustled from construction job to getting certifications, to getting a server job to pay his way through it, and literally lives and embodies being creative, being resourceful, and values stacking skills on top of everything. And so I'm excited to dive in. I'm going to give you a warning of this one, as we're coming straight for the soul, straight for the tickles, and we're going to start having a conversation about the misnomers we see in the market and really empower people to take a stand for their life and go after what they want. And so without further ado, Tony, welcome to the show.
George, it is a long time coming, man, but I'm always good to be connected with you, and I enjoy your content as well. And you've got a good heart, and I could tell by the way you interact with your audience that they do care about you, and it's a mutual feeling. So honored to be here, brother.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked. And for everybody listening, I'm just going to hit you with this right now because Tony Whatley is on the show. I didn't say his last name, but there's not many people I consume. I'm really, really protective about it, but I feel like every day I open Facebook, I have you on my Facebook feed as like show first. And every day I feel like
Troll of the day, huh?
Yeah. I'm like, I need my Tony dose of the day, but it always tends to tickle me at the deepest level, whether
Yeah.
it's about life and being a father, or a perspective shift on entrepreneurship, or, you know, how to focus on the right things. And I genuinely appreciate it. So for everybody listening, I'm going to hit this right now. Because Tony's podcast is incredible. We've have some mutual shared guests and a lot of shared friends, but his podcast is called 365 Driven, which is also his website, and his Instagram, which is 365 Driven. And I'm just going to say it now so it's in the top of your brain. But Tony and I were talking before the show, and quite frankly, we could have talked forever because he also does events in Whitefish. And so one of them, I almost peeked in the door, but I felt like it was a little, a little bit of a pattern interrupt because we didn't know each other then. But we were talking about the show and I was like, what's kind of boiling your blood right now? What are you seeing? And he shared a sentiment about this. People in our space, whether you're a coach, whether you're a quote unquote influencer or guru, are starting to bite the hand that feeds them. And I was like, I want your hot take and your perspective on this because we have a lot of coaches that listen to this show. And so I'd love to kind of just let you riff on that to start.
Yeah, I noticed really in recent months, some of these people that are coaching, people that are, well known, they've got audiences as well. They would start to talk negatively about the profession of coaching. You and I both like to make fun of the people that are just dirt bags and are kind of shitheads. Like, that's fine. Like, if someone's got a negative intention and they're a dirt bag, yeah, make fun of those people, clown them. They deserve it. They earned that. But to make fun of or to diminish the value of coaching and say like coaching and everybody's a coach now. And those kind of posts really are just engagement bait for these kind of influencers. And it kind of really rubs me raw because I remember some of these people when they were getting started and they were coaching still one-on-one and they were doing the same things I do. But as soon as they started learning digital marketing and built their little course and sold it for $9.97 and earned royalties from the stage from their bigger influencer friends, and it's like you've gotten too big for your britches now and you're kind of biting the hand that feeds you. Like, you're going to attack the profession of coaching when you know damn well there's some good coaches, when you know damn well that they used to be good coaches themselves. And so I don't know. I just don't like when people talk negatively about the profession. I think it should be an individual thing, not really a generalization thing.
Yeah, I would agree. It reminds me one of my dear friends and mentors, Jeff Spencer, who's responsible for like 70 gold medals at the Olympics as a coach. He said this to me like 10 years ago in Michael Fishman's room. And he's like, do me a favor. And I was like, yeah. He's like, name me an Olympian without a coach. And I'm like, I can't. He's like, great. Name me one of the coaches with a gold medal. And I'm like, I can't. And it's one of those things where I would say to venture to say, like, knowing the circle that you surround yourself with, like, coaching is one of the most powerful tools and shortcuts in the game. And I've seen the same thing. And I'm curious as to your thoughts too, because one of the things that you help people do so deeply is, like, I see this all the time in my industry. Everyone wants more time, money, or freedom. But then the moment you give it to them, they don't know what to do with it because it's like they're avoiding a relationship with their self, right? And so I'm curious in this lens of people attacking the hands that feeds them and attacking the industry. You help people with get more freedom, get more confidence, get more money, but like in that same vein, you said they're too big for their britches. And one of the things that I see that you embody is like this humility of like constantly improving, constantly looking for feedback, constantly trying to get better. Like, what are some of the mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making or the people that you're around that like lead to that?
First off, the coaching, I do take it serious. It's a full-time thing that I do. And as you mentioned earlier, I help people scale and exit. And when you sell a business, it's usually the largest transaction of your life. I mean, most people think buying an expensive car is a high dollar transaction or selling a house is a high dollar transaction. Those apply for most people, 99% of the people. But if you're a business owner and you build a company with enterprise value and it's worth something to a buyer and you sell it and you make millions of dollars, that is typically the thing that puts you on a different trajectory in life. It occurred for me, happened in 2008 when I sold my first company for a few million. And so I understand the importance of that. And what most people don't really talk about on the exit is the emotional journey that you go through when you're in that, the selling process and then looking at things and the due diligence. And it's an emotional journey because you're selling something you have poured your blood, sweat, and tears into. There's a lot of emotional attachments to the company or the brand that you've created. You want to see it carry on and prosper with the new owners. And you hope that your employees that are really good stay with it to keep it going. And you worry about their futures as well. So there's a lot of things. And so I don't like when people talk negatively about the profession. Like you said, like every top performer and athletes and business, even in the Fortune 500 companies, I used to work for those companies, big oil companies. And I would have conversations with some of the executive team and the CEO one time, even in an elevator. I saw a speech and I talked to him and said, "You're a really good speaker. How, is this something you came natural?" And he's like, "No, I hired a speaking coach." And I said, "How many coaches do you have?" And he told me he had 5 coaches. I was like, "Whoa, you have 5 coaches." And this guy's maybe the same age I am now. I was younger at the time. And he's got a fitness coach. He had a nutritional and health coach. He had business coach, executive coach, and a speaker coach to help write and prepare him for speeches. And so when you think about that, someone of a major oil company has 5 coaches to be the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar international organization. Then who at any other level thinks that they're too big or too important to have somebody help them? And so I do agree that there has been a flood of people in the coaching space, especially during COVID years when people were sitting home for months at a time trying to figure out what they were going to do. And I think a lot of times people got into the profession for the wrong reason. They just thought it was going to be easy and I could get paid and sit at home and surf the internet. But here's the thing. You didn't have the personality for that. If you never wanted to be a teacher, if you never were a coach anywhere or a mentor in your life, then you don't really have the character to want to do that. And a lot of people just thought it was an easy way, low barrier to get into money, and they were just not really good at what they did. They didn't have any real experience to coach people on. And the result was dismal, and people were really upset about that. I get that, but you shouldn't disparage the profession because that really hurts the people that are really good at what they do.
Yeah, I say that wholeheartedly and agree with that whole sentiment. And even it's funny too, because I never realized like how much being a Marine lended me to like this, because like there was not 1 ounce of my vision board of like, oh, I want to be a coach. Like my job, I was like, I'm going to do 30 years in the Marine Corps. I'm going to hand out smiley face stickers at Walmart. And then the Marine Corps is like, hey, we're medically separating. You know, I started as a food blogger and then, you know, transitioned in. But to your point, like coaching to me is like one of the greatest gifts, but also like 20 years of therapy a day, because it's a mirror in front of my face, like over and over about how I communicate, what I see, how I hold lines and boundaries. And I have 2 questions, because I would actually love your perspective on this, because I know so many of our mutual friends that are some of the most incredible coaches in the world. And then I also get hit up in my DMs 27 times a day, getting pitched everything you can imagine from every different angle that are
only 27. Oh man, those are rookie numbers. You gotta step that up.
Luckily, I'm banned on LinkedIn, because I saw one of your posts about
oh gosh,
a message notification on LinkedIn is like the most useless thing ever. And I got banned on LinkedIn for life because my CEO logged in as me and it violated their terms of service, and they blanket banned me for life. Like I printed it out and put it in my office. But in that vein too, like I would love to know your perspective of like, because the industry itself, like I believe in coaching in every ounce and capacity, but there is a lot of noise in the coaching industry. How do you recommend that people navigate, like when looking for a coach or filtering a coach or finding a coach? Like what traits do they look for? Like what should they be thinking about or processing through? Because I also feel like, and I don't know if you're like this too, but because of like my stance on people, I tend to get people after they've been burnt by like everybody else, right? Like I'm like the Robin Hood of coaching, where I'm like, okay, like I have my bucket full. Okay, like I caught you.
You got all the damaged apples coming to you, huh? And you got to figure it out.
Yeah. So like, what
That's tough.
what are your tips or recommendations for people when like navigating that space and like even having a relationship with coaching, but looking at it of like how to see through the noise or how to cut through the noise to find one that's supportive of them?
I'll just put it in context first. So if you're just hiring a coach to teach you how to build web pages or something, like, okay, that's fine. So find someone that's got expertise in that, demonstrated history of good results. If you're hiring a financial advisor to help you with money things, they better be wealthy, because there's a whole lot of financial. I've been burned by these people, multiple 6 figures being burned by people that call themselves wealth advisors. I've never to this day had a single wealth advisor on my show for that reason, because most of them are full of shit. And nowadays with technology, you can actually go look up where they live and see if they actually live the lifestyle that they talk about on the internet. You can see the cars that they're registered to. You can see their address. You can see all these things. And so if I'm going to take advice on wealth, I want to make sure someone's demonstrating that they have achieved wealth, especially in investments or things that they sell, right? Now, for business coach, I would never hire a business coach who has never owned a business, or at least not been a executive at a high level business, because I do think there's a lot of value in corporate experience. In my corporate experience, I was managing $200 to $300 million type projects, international, a lot of regulation, heaviest regulations in the world, oil and gas, 75 to 100 people on these teams, very strict processes, high risk, high reward, big dollar burn rates. We're burning over $1 million a day. So I had to be able to make good decisions at that kind of level with money. And so when people boohoo employees that are out there and it's like, oh, you know, they never owned a company. It's like, well, what did they do in their career? It's a whole lot different than saying, okay, I managed restaurants like I did in my college years. Right. And so, but I would prefer that they have built a successful company and scaled it, at least exited or something before they get in. Because there's a lot of people that do a business coaching certification. And all these coaching certifications you guys see out there are another bullshit way to make money for the certification company. It doesn't make you better at being a coach. It doesn't give you more experience or wisdom. You're just regurgitating a 10-step plan that somebody put together and they sold it to you for a couple grand. And you feel more important because you got a certification, and most people can kind of see right through that. And so how do I pick a coach? Well, I've got two mentors. One's Ed Milet. The other one's Andy Frisella. These are gentlemen that I've followed for several years, made contact with them, had both of them on my show. And if you go back and look at their history, 10 plus years, they have demonstrated that they have been very successful over and over and over again in many different ways of their lives. And when they created Iterate Syndicate, I was like, okay, I'm going to go learn from these guys. And so I've never joined any other coaching groups. I've never done anything. It's like, I don't need to do those things. I have a lot of peers. We have groups that we talk and we share insights in the industry and marketing and social media and things like that to help each other. But always go back and use Google and look and see what they've done in their life. You know, if they're teaching you how to scale and exit, have they done that? Have they have a lot of clients that have done that that'll speak for them? Go look at the hints of their lives. I mean, I'm not talking about the guys that are just buying Lamborghinis and flexing and, you know, showing their Rolex every day, because that appeals mostly to broke people who don't know any better. And to me, that's like new money behavior. Yep. It's like, okay, you're newly rich and you're like, I had to go through that. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I did that in my 30s when I became a multimillionaire. And so when I see people doing that shit now, it's like, okay, you're just new money. That's new money behaviors. You're attracting a different type of audience than I am. I'm looking for confident people who have maybe made money for a while and they're okay with that. And they don't need to show it off all the time. But even if you were to go look on my social media and go back 20 years, you'll still see evidence that I was doing things pretty well, even 20 years ago. And I think that's a key. I think people should do more due diligence and look up things and look up the backgrounds. And as I mentioned, nowadays, everything's on the internet. You can actually do background checks and criminal history, and you'd be surprised. Well, you may not be surprised because you know this, you're aware. There's a lot of big name players in the influencer and coaching space who have criminal history, have gone to prison, have gone bankrupt many times, have restraining orders against have restraining orders filed against, with their wives or ex-wives or girlfriends, and people go to these people and they worship them and they act like they know everything. And it's like, dude, did you even run a background check? You can join these accounts for like $19 and do this nowadays. Like, why aren't people doing this now?
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of those, and I'm never surprised anymore.
I'm never surprised.
And it's like, you do it long enough and you're like, you can see it from a mile away and you're like, give this a year or two and like, it'll all come out. Yeah. It's a big one. I have a interesting, because this is probably more of like a hot take too, but I would love for you to define like coaching, right? Because I think even in like how diluted, let's put it, the market is and saturated is with like these false coaches, I feel like there's a lot of false expectations in it as well, both on the coaching side and on the person hiring a coach. So like, I would love your definition of coaching so I can unpack it and ask you another question.
You know, it's evolved since I've been doing it more full time. I guess I'm going on 9 years now. And early on, when I was positioning myself more as a business coach, you would think it would be talking more about processes and systems and leadership and accounting and all these levers that we can pull to make our business more successful or survive. And that is initially how it starts out. But then when you start to get to know the client really well, and it doesn't take long, maybe 2-3 months into a coaching thing, you start to realize that the business challenges that we face are not always the things that are on our mind. It's really the personal challenges. And so probably a few years into it, I started to shift and I started to notice that there was this pattern that was kind of reappearing where I would say early days, it was 75% business talk with my clients. And after a few months in, it became 75% personal challenges or whatever the biggest thing is in their mind right now, or whatever the thing that's keeping them up at night or creating some sort of stress. And that could be their relationships, their health, their children acting strange or, just being disconnected or, because I understand we're humans. And even as entrepreneurs, whatever the biggest challenge that is keeping you up every night is, until we address that, until we help you get some, you know, decision around that or some actions around that, it's going to be at the top of your mind and you're never going to focus on the business thing. So it's in our best interest to kind of get that, minimize it or control it or get rid of it before we can actually start talking about business again. And I think that's where an experienced coach can key in on those kind of things and understand, hey, this is an emotional thing as well as it is a logical thing. And yeah, that was probably the more surprising thing to me is that it shifted more to an executive coaching role where sometimes you do feel like a therapist. Sometimes you do feel like a smaller private board of directors because entrepreneurs, especially larger companies, let's say 10 million plus revenue, they don't have board of directors a lot of times and they don't always trust the people that are around them because they're surrounded with people that just want to nod and say yes and all these things. And so they like to have these confident, confidential conversations with people to ask you bounce off ideas and go, what do you think about this? And hey, do you think we should, promote this person over here? Here's the pros and cons. And they have a good sounding board that they can have in private. And the best part about that is they leave those meetings with a course of action and they're ready to go do those things.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because I think even when I started years and years and years ago, it started almost, for lack of better terms, transactionally, right? Like, fix my customer journey. I want to scale my business, and help me with this marketing strategy. I want to scale my business. But then after a little bit of time, you realize that it's the person in the driver's seat that makes it effective or not effective, not necessarily the strategy or tactic underneath it, to where now I wholeheartedly agree with you across the board on that definition. Because the reason I ask that too is because I also think, even for me, when I hired coaches early on or had mentors, I was like, I had this, and I'll own this, unspoken expectation that they were going to come do the work for me, right? Like, I'm like, wait, this just doesn't work, right? Like, you mean you don't tell me? And it like puts itself in. There's this semblance of like workout or chopping wood, carrying water, putting it in
Yeah.
there. Because it's one of the things I see now. It's still in coaching. I still coach a lot of coaches, and you'll get this energy from them, and or even with their clients, they're like, well, my clients aren't doing anything. And I was like, well, yeah, they have to be kind of guided and inspired and held accountable to do
Held
it.
accountable is the hard part. Too
That's
many, too many newer coaches want to be friends with their clients. And you should be friendly, but not be friends with your clients because then you kind of sever the accountability relationship, especially if they're not used to having that. Because as a coach, we still have to be objective, but also be subjective with our opinions and say, hey, this is why you're failing. I need you to step this up. I need you to do what you say you're going to do, what we agreed on, and give me the results by the time we get to the meeting next week. And so that accountability is actually key. And we all need it. Even the highest performers need accountability, whether it's a group accountability or a mentor, or even nowadays, like when you and I are putting ourselves out there, we're using our audience to keep us accountable. Because if I show up and I'm fat and I'm just letting myself go and getting sloppy and content starting to suck, that's on me. And I know that people are watching. And so I understand that I have that responsibility to demonstrate what I do what you preach.
Yep.
And I'm happy to do that. But I think that the group accountability, the audience accountability does help me.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad that you said that, because that's where I was gonna go, because that's a I'll just put it on the docket. Like, that's a painful lesson that I learned, and having so many things cross over into the friend line, to where, like, I love my clients to pieces and we're friends, but we now have compartmentalization, and there's like hey, when we go into the war room, like, we're in the war room, and like, that's aside. Like, I'm going to love you and we're going to have dinner later, but I'm going to say this thing, and it might tickle a little bit. Right. So what are some of the things that you see as like successful traits as like a coach, or to embody as a coach? Because I feel like the line that you just hit with accountability is one that I see missed a lot of, to where almost the coach becomes a part of the person's business because they aren't holding them accountable. Right. And so there's
Yeah.
also this like toe tapping of like, I don't know if I should say that or not say that. But what do you think are like the most successful traits that a coach should embody, or even flex the muscle of practicing to be effective as a coach?
I think the number one characteristic that all successful people, not just coaches, should have or work towards is having certainty. I think too many people want to delay a decision. And there's times when that's important to do so, but a lot of times you have all the information in front of you that you're ever going to have. You have the wisdom, you have the experience, you have the data, you have the proof, the evidence, and too many people are unwilling to make a damn decision and do something. And so it used to drive me nuts. Even in the corporate world, you get to this mid-tier management level and you start seeing people that would have a meeting to try to solve something. But at the end of the meeting, they're like, well, let's just regroup next week and have another meeting to, those are just ineffective leaders. You need to be certain and understand, okay, what is the risk versus the reward? Here's a decision. Every decision we make is a risk or a reward. Assess that. What is the real loss? Is it going to cost me a couple grand, but the upside is it makes $100,000? Then why am I not making that decision? I'm okay losing $1,000 or that $2,000. Even like when people hire a coach and they like, what is the risk versus reward? You should always have that quick assessment. And when you understand that this is not a permanent decision, many times, that all decisions lead to future decisions. If we come to a different crossroad, then make some damn decisions and keep going. And I think too many people just hesitate and they do just worry about things too much. And, even like starting businesses, this is a silly one. This one blows my mind. People will sit there and tell you, like, I want to start a business someday. I want to be an entrepreneur someday. They'll tell you that. We both know people 20 plus years that have been saying that have never done anything about it. And here's why. They're so worried about quitting their job, which sometimes it's forced upon you. Like when COVID shut down jobs and people are being laid off. People are still being laid off nowadays with the economy still recovering. Everyone that's listening to the show has applied probably to many jobs in their life if they're over 20 years old, and they're used to just interviewing and getting a job. That's a normal thing in life. Why are so many people not willing to risk doing what they love and doing what they're really good at to worry about losing their job and having to go get another job? If that's the biggest risk that you're having to take, then that's a really pathetic way to think about it. Now, yeah, so be certain, learn to be certain. People are actually attracted to people that are more certain and are decisive. You don't have to be 100% right all the time, but you have to understand if things go wrong, that's just another decision, and be certain again and go with everything that you know. And if you don't have all the knowledge, get that knowledge and then make a decision. I think another characteristic I would say, this more applies to like the life coaches or even some of the executive coaches. Man, everybody's dealing with something in their lives. Everyone, you are, I am, every one of us. Some people blatantly put their shit out there online. They're having meltdowns and just going crazy, and they're struggling with mental health sometimes. I get it. People go through these cycles. I've been through that cycle at some point in my life. But don't you dare try to coach other people through what you're still stuck in. I see this too much. If you're going through that, you should not be trying to coach other people how to get out of the same problem as you. And your content will attract people that are kind of in that same process. You should not be making offers to those people to try to help them out of it if you haven't figured out how to get out for yourself. And I think that's a big foul. And so if you're an audience member and you're watching some of these people and you're going through something that they're going, do not reach out and give them your credit card to help you get through, because they're not through it themselves. Find people who have actually done that, made it through, wrote the book, and can teach you exactly how to get through it. So yeah, be really transparent with who you're trying to hire.
Yeah, that one landed and tickled and needed to be said, because there was something else that you said in there too that I think is important to talk about, because the decision piece, I would venture to say that even in confidence, which is one of the things that you love and help people embody, like confidence comes through decisions.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily the best decisions. Like you've talked about this, where like you've scaled companies, you've sold companies, but you've had a lot of failures and learned through those failures. But I think the undertone of that I feel like you nailed is that nothing's permanent, but there's evolutions underneath all of this. Like even when we were talking about like coaching and how coaching's evolved, right? Like I go through these seasons where like I was like, oh, I'm just coaching, or it's a mastermind, and then now I'm back in like some fractional CMO roles in companies, and I was like, oh, I didn't see that as like something that was on the table. But I see this Gary said this years ago. He's like, if you're romantic about how you do business, you'll go out of business, right? And that lack of decision or indecision is a decision, and it ends up costing so much pain because they don't go through this iterations. And so would you say that, like, because you help people with confidence, and certainty is definitely a big part of that, but to your point, I don't think it's necessarily certainty, to your point, that like, oh, it's going to work. It's certain that I'm going to keep going until it works. Is that fair?
It's the certainty of the direction or the action you should take when you're faced with a question, right? This even applies for sales. You're a marketing guy. Think about when you were first in sales of something and you were not really good at it, but you thought you were trying to be helpful. Like, I'll give you an example. Even being a waiter at a restaurant back when I was in college, people will say, "Hey, what's good on the menu?" And you would list like 5 things, like, "Oh, this is good. This is good. This is really popular. And I like this one. I eat this one on break." And you look back at the customer and they're kind of still confused because you just gave them a bunch of answers. But if you would have just said, this is the one item that is the one that you have to have, it is the most amazing thing on the menu, that's what I would go with. You would probably sell a lot of those things. I even experienced that in retail with one of my companies selling automotive wheels. People would email me or call me and say, "Hey, I've got this car and I would like to put some wheels on it." And I said, okay, I would ask rudimentary questions like, okay, what's your budget? What color do you like? And, do you like a certain amount of spokes on the wheel? 5 spoke, 6 spoke, 10 spoke. And they're like, okay, they would answer those pretty well. But my rookie salesperson and myself at that time would say, well, here's the 10 models and brands of the wheels that I would consider that fit that category. Like, I can get all these for you. And what always happens is I go, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Let me get back to you, because you confused him. You gave him a bunch of options. And then luckily I started to learn more about sales and marketing. And I know that people are listening to this and they're going, oh shit, this is kind of like my business. I can apply it to my business. Certainty is when someone comes to me and asks about coaching and I listen and ask the right questions. I say, you would be perfect for this. Not, and I have this, and you can upsell this. And if you can't afford that, I got this. I would say, nope, based on what I've asked you and where you're at, this is what you need right here. That's certainty. We're leading to one decision. That's what we're always trying to get someone to, one decision. And if you can learn that skill, you will close a lot more deals, get a lot more clients, sell a lot more individual products. You just don't want to confuse people.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you to carry that through to coaching as well, because I feel like one of the things that I see, especially in our industry, as we both do the same thing, is not taking that same principle and applying it to coaching as well. Like giving somebody 20 things to do at once so they do none of them instead of having, do you see that too? Same kind of point?
Absolutely. One of the things when people, let's use the starting the business idea thing. If you look at all the things you have to do to start the business and actually make the first dollar, it's overwhelming. It's a big pile of things. Oh man, I got to create a business checking account. I've got to get the EIN with the federal. I've got to file an LLC. I've got to, maybe get a PO box so people don't have to see where I live. Like, there's a lot of tasks, and most people look at that and they just defeat it. They just go, oh, I can't do this. It's just too much. I'm too busy. But if you were to give someone a roadmap and go, hey, today, do this one thing. It takes 2 days to get that. When you get that, just do this next thing. And all these tasks are down the line. We know that they're coming, but if you have a roadmap and know which sequence to do them in, it doesn't seem nearly as overwhelming. It's like, oh, I can call the bank and set up a checking account. That takes an hour. Oh, I can file an LLC. That takes 45 minutes online. That's not a big deal. Like, I can hire someone to create a logo on Fiverr and pay $25 and wait for results. Like, that takes 3 or 4 days, like, big deal. And so now if someone looks at the roadmap and understands the process and the steps, dude, they end up with the business. They start exactly with what they want instead of going, oh, this is a lot of things to do. I don't know if I can get into this. This just seems overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. I genuinely, and even to your earlier point too, is like, finding that person who has walked it or experienced it or worked in it before that can lay that thing out, because the decisions and it's the mile markers, right? Like I see this all the time, even when people want to scale, they're like, oh, okay, like I want to scale now. And I'm like, but that's still bite by bite. It's not running 100 miles at once. It's getting mile 1, mile 2, mile 3, and almost earning the right to complicate it as it goes. And, you know, that's probably the biggest one. Cause like I'll put myself on blast on this one. Like I was the king of giving the 777 things that you could do and all need to be done, but never really prioritizing them. And it's funny
Yeah.
because if I'm on a call and I get the 10 things out that we can do, if I'm not clear of like, oh, and here's the first thing I want you to do,
That's right.
then we end up right back in the same situation.
Yeah. And, you know, new people to coaching or information type products, they think more is better because in their mind, if I give you more courses and more videos and more, then it's worth the money I'm asking. And man, that's actually some of the worst advice you can ever have, because if I log into your video library and you've got 200 videos and I don't know which ones to watch, and I'm not going to watch 200, no one will watch 200 videos of anything. They could be the best videos in the world and nobody's going to watch 200 of those videos. But if I logged in and said, man, I've got this one challenge, maybe like you said, it's a marketing positioning message. And you said, I've got this one course for this. And they logged in and it was one video and it solved their problem. They're damn sure going to watch it. They're going to get the result and they're going to be happy that they paid for that and they can move on to the next problem. But don't just think like you got this library of stuff and you keep adding more to it and it's going to be more valuable. That is valuable to rookies because people think more is better when they're rookies at this kind of stuff. But the truth is they're going to join your group or they're going to buy that course. They're not going to watch any of the videos because they're confused. And then they're going to think like that was a bad experience. That sucked. I got taken advantage of. I felt like I wasted my money. And that's not what you want. As a coach, as a mentor, as an information provider, you want your clients to have a result. And you have to do your job to not confuse them so that they actually get a result. And once they get the result, they'll feel good about it. They'll keep doing more with you.
Yep. That needed to be said too, because, and even I feel like up until, let's call it COVID and AI, that was happening a whole lot more frequently, but now there's just such a rise in access to information.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you can ChatGPT claude your way into like the meat of it, which even
YouTube University, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I started, but and I fell into that more trap for years too, because I was a food blogger. So when I started, it actually was more, because people like, oh, I want more recipes. I need more.
I could see that. I could see that for food bloggers because they hop around and they're wanting a different. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it took me a while to break that habit, because like even now, and I'll ask you a question about this in a minute, but to our iteration point, like now in the content that I create is around customer journey or scaling or marketing or, you know, any of those buckets. The default muscle for me still used to be like, oh, I'll do more. Do more. And now I go back and I'm like, oh, I can make that simpler. Oh, I can put that in one video that gets directly to the message. I can, you know, simplify that down and put a worksheet with it that makes it tangible and tactical. And I think the other thing that I'd see, and I'd love your thoughts on this as well, is like, I think the more trap is just like you called out, like a giant challenge. But I also think the finish line trap is just as much of like, oh, I made it 12 months ago, it's still applicable. Or I made it, you know, 18 months ago, I'm still using the same thing. Right. So like, what is your view or your process on like iterations and improvement? Because you're constantly improving. And I feel like the best coaches do. They're working on themselves. They're getting mentorship. But how do you navigate that?
I think there's a balance that you have to understand of what you enjoy doing and what's necessary. I think too many people focus solely on what they enjoy doing. It's just like if you have a task list, there's been many times where people will just maybe even do a task that's not even on their list that day. And as soon as they're done, they'll go write the task that they completed on their list. And if you've ever caught yourself doing guilty, I've done this before. I'm sure you have as well. That is a psychological thing because you want to feel like you've been productive and you want to go write it on there just to draw the line right through it immediately. And it's kind of an endorphin release and you feel like I accomplished something and I had to record that. Just think of how asinine that is. You did the task, you didn't need to put it on the list and you went on there and wrote it and just to cross it out. Like there's something fundamentally wrong with that. All right. And then you have the other tasks that have been on there 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, maybe. And you go, why haven't I done those on there? Usually because our internal compass, we realize that task that we're procrastinating or avoiding is actually the one that's going to move the needle the most and may even move us closer towards our goals. And so you you weigh it with some type of gravity, like this is a big task and it's going to move, like writing a book or launching a podcast or creating a new funnel. Like, what are these things? Like, all these things are like big tasks for most people, but they'll sit there and try to use not having that or not doing that to justify why they're not where they want to be. But just like anything, man, you go do one of those big tasks. Most of the times it's not nearly as hard as or challenging as we thought it was going to be. Like, we get done with it and we're like, oh crap, that only took like an hour. Like, I thought it was going to take me a week to do that. And then you start to see the results from that, and you start to realize, like, what are the things I'm procrastinating and doing? What are the tasks like that are actually going to move the needle? Which ones are more significant than the other? And just quit trying to do all this busy work, little crap that you can write on and scratch off and feel good. Like, oh, I did 3 things today, like 3 little things or 3 real things. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I love the way that you framed it, because like I call them, needle movers, right? And I even tell people, like, you have to earn the right to touch your business every day, because I don't know if you see this in coaching, but I sure as heck do. Not only will people hide in the busy work, but they'll self-sacrifice in the process and end up doing damage to themselves, right? They won't hit their wickets of their body, right? They won't pray or meditate, right? They
Right.
won't sleep correctly. And so, like, even when I'm coaching clients, like, I make them make a workout for the player, and then the playbook's the business. And I'm like, great. Like, what are those 3 needle movers that, you keep moving that list on because your internal compass knows, but
Yeah.
hey, you're not allowed to touch those until you wake up in the morning and you hit like your gratitude, you move your body, and then you can
Yeah.
kind of like earn the right. Do you see that in coaching as well too? Because that's probably the third one. Like, mistake number 1 is that like more trap. Mistake number 2 is like that finish line trap. And then that mistake number 3 is, I find that people, and I do this too, like I'll own this all day, because this is why I have accountability. Like, my partner's my coach, I have mentors around me, but I will find myself like self-sacrificing and hiding in the business and avoiding the tasks that would allow me to have the confidence or the freedom that you speak to. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things people hide from is social media or creating content. When you think about this, I mean, I've been a business owner for over 20 years, and marketing has always been my favorite thing, especially the creative side. I'm a very artistic type person. Visually, I like to look at things and see why things are attracting, and to have like these little devices that we carry in our pockets, these marvels of the internet, and the access to potentially thousands of people or millions if you were able to grow a following that big. Only 10 years ago, that would have required gatekeepers. You would have had to known people that work at radio stations or national television, or like, it just, people take it for granted. Like, the most powerful tool for marketing is in your pocket, and it's basically free, and you still don't use it. And you're still not putting yourself out there. You're still not creating content. You're still not growing an audience. And because it's uncomfortable, people are worried about being judged. They worry about what people are going to think about them, or how they're going to look, or how they're going to speak, or all these things that can be fixed. And so they avoid that by, like you said, they hide in their business. Like, I'm just going to do a bunch of busy tasks, and then I'm going to get on the coaching call with George at the end of the week and be like, oh man, yeah, I didn't create that content because I was busy. I had all these tasks. And you and I both know, like, if you're not marketing, then you're not going to get any clients. So all these processes and systems and webs and funnels and all these things that you're building, if you don't have leads going to those and you're not getting any attention, then you're just building a system for nothing, because there's nothing. It's going to be a machine with nothing going through it. And so we go back on the coaching here, the gurus and the big coaches and stuff like that. The most popular influencers and the most popular coaches that are out there that you may think of, these big names, they're not necessarily the best coaches. Some of them are terrible coaches, but they are some of the best marketers. Mm-hmm. And that's why you know them. And that's why they get on big stages and you don't. And that's why they get on big podcasts. And that's why they do all these things that you would dream about, but you're avoiding it because you're uncomfortable and worried about being judged by firing up the camera and getting on your video.
Yep. Oh man, I'm going to ask you a question about this, because I love this. This is profound, and I'm going to take some poignant reminders from it. My favorite thing to say is, like, you don't need 4 hours to look for inspiration, right? Like,
No.
If you're looking for inspiration, I say this to people, I just said this in my event. I'm like, if you're consuming, you're building somebody else's vision. If you're creating, you're building your own.
Yep.
And, I watch you post a lot, right? And iterate and go and make adjustments to you if you go. But I see people like, I want this perfect plan of like, what do I say in this perfect video? Or what do I post up in this perfect thing? And there isn't a perfect one. I even say this in marketing. I'm like, marketing is guessing and testing until something works. And you better have 3 guesses waiting in the queue, because the moment it works, it's going to stop working again. Right. But to your point of like the judgment, right? Like, I love reading your posts, and myself included. I've been canceled a few times already. So I feel like it was kind of taken out of me already, because I got canceled for things that I didn't even do. But then I was like, oh, I'm still here and I can still create, and the right people are there.
Yeah.
What do you do? Because I know you have clients that probably come into this as well. Like, how do you face that judgment? Like, how do you support somebody, or have any wisdom or advice for people of like, whether I look like this on video? Like, I'll tell you right now, I've only had one video go viral in my entire career. It was like 7.5 million views on Facebook. I was live.
That's huge, dude.
Yeah, I was like, it was the live video I didn't want to do that day. And I made a commitment to go live every day for like 365 days. And I was like, it was the one day where I'm like, I'm not doing this. This is the dumbest thing ever. Right. And I was like, well, when I even turned on the live video and I said it, I was like, I don't want to be here today. Like, I didn't shower, and I was like 80 pounds heavier than I am now. Like, I was like in the dumpster fire. And of course, of all videos, that's the one that goes viral. But it's this consistency piece. And so how do you recommend, number one, that people navigate that? And I know the easy answer is like, just do it. But I am constantly still surrounded by this fear of judgment, or, in the current climate of the world that we're in, like my beliefs, or how I view the world as a parent, or how I choose to see marketing or business. And you do this really well. Like, you know who you are, you own who you are, and you're kind of unapologetic about it. But what would your advice be for people that are facing that judgment, or that fear of judgment?
I think for the general audience, especially people who are still working for companies and they don't have control of their livelihood, you do have to be careful with what you put on the internet. Because is it a conflict of interest? Is it too political where your customers of the company you work for can get you fired, because that happens? Or is it your supervisor that disagrees with your core beliefs and could make your life miserable for you to quit? Like, those things all happen. So I get that. When I was in corporate world, I had to behave on the internet, and I couldn't do the things that I do now. So that should also be a motivator for you to go attain that freedom by creating your own source of income in your own life. Because once you get on the other side of that, you can't be fired anymore. And people will tell me, Tony, you got clients and you got customers that might get mad. And it's like, no, because if you're true to who you are and share your core values, and you share your beliefs, and you're respectful at doing so, like, you're not antagonizing, you're just stating your opinions. You're being like a philosopher. Like, this is what I believe today, based on the knowledge that I have, the wisdom that I have, the data, the evidence, the realizations. I believe firmly with all that information that this is my opinion on this subject today. And that's what a philosopher does. If you want to be a thought leader, you're willing to change that opinion given new evidence, new data, new discoveries, new wisdom. If something were to change that belief, a real thought leader would be willing to be equally strong tomorrow with their current belief system, where most people will never do that. Vast majority of people, like, we just had a political election, right? Whatever side you're on, there are some people that will never vote for the other party because they've built an identity around, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. And so they will never vote, even if they agreed with 99% of what the other team is saying. They are so worried about their identity that they've built over years, that their friend group is the same identity, their parents are the same identity, and they don't want to offend their friends. And so they're not willing to say things publicly that would go against what they believe. Mm-hmm. And that just makes you a sheep. And most people, unfortunately, are sheep. They don't want to change their opinion. If you want to be a thought leader, you don't want to be a thought repeater. And so that's the difference, I think, with the stuff I make content. I think people have learned that I'm willing to change my position given new evidence. And I'm always trying to be respectful of the way I interact with people. And yeah, occasionally you'll get someone that comes in and wants to throw a haymaker and wants to, be the I told you so person. But those are also great opportunities to diffuse those situations or handle those also respectfully, because whenever somebody starts drama on your page and you handle it witty or funny, or you diffuse the situation, or you're professional and respectful about it, all those other people watching the content are going to see how you interact with people. They're going to start to go, well, he's just as emotional and unhinged as they are. Or they're going to be like, oh man, he burned them pretty good with their own stuff. And, you know, he's actually being funny about it. Like, which person are you going to get more audience from? Right.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
I
so use those
wholeheartedly.
moments, use those hater comments and stuff like that. And you're going to get them as soon as you start getting attention and putting yourself out there. You will have haters, you will have naysayers, you will have critics. Anyone who doesn't have any of those, you're just not doing anything worth noticing. And that's the hard truth. I'm not saying it to be hateful. It just means that nobody cares what you're doing. If nobody's commenting, no one's doing anything, no one's even criticizing you, you're obscure. That's the hard truth. And you're doing something, you're hiding, you're not sharing your real opinions. This election cycle, we saw people have meltdowns in their comments because they were happy that Trump won. And people are like, I can't believe you supported Trump. He's going to ruin the world. And all whatever these fear-based things that were created by the news agencies. And if you're having people that have this weird emotional unhinged response to your posts, it's because you have not been doing good enough at sharing your real opinions all the time. Because if they knew what you believed in and they knew where you stood all the time, those emotional crazy people would just kind of weed themselves out and unfollow you, unfriend you, whatever. Like, that's fine. You don't want those people around anyways, because they're never going to hire you. They're never going to refer business to you. They're never going to hang out with you. And so their opinion's just their own opinion, and they're entitled to that. But when you start being more bold with your opinions, you're going to push away the people that don't want to be around. You don't want to be around them anyways, but you're also going to greatly attract the people that you do want around you, the people that do have core values that align with you, the people that do believe in the same missions, the people that do have personal development and things that are in their mind. And so you got to be out there sharing your opinions, man. And I learned that. I just had to just keep doing it. And it's hard. It was really hard. But once you become true to who you are, you don't really care what people think.
Yeah, I have so much to say to that, and just yes, because I've never, and I don't talk politics, but I love people. And I've been, if I look back at like content I created 8 years ago, I'm not embarrassed. Like, I'm proud of myself for changing my opinion and like
There you go.
growing and being open and learning, because it's so big. But like, I even had this come up with a client a couple of months ago because they don't share who they really are on the front, and it was like put in this marketing box and this label box, and then they end up with clients that are completely out of alignment with who they are as a person, and it's like soul sucking to them because they're like, what do I do, what do I do, like I feel out of integrity, and they have to genuinely like end that client relationship because
Yeah.
the values are missing at the deepest level. And I don't even think it's shared values, it's solid ground, that knowing you both know where each other stand, and you respect that and represent that
Yep.
and are willing to work together. But it's when none of it's spoken or none of it's shared that it causes like, it can cause massive pain in companies, hiring teams, having clients, especially when you get into like private coaching and private client where people paying you multiple six figures and you're like, wait, I wouldn't have dinner with this person. And I'm like,
That's right.
that's a problem. Like, that's a problem at like a deep level. And, you know, I think about this often because I used to, and I fell into this trap as well. And even now, like, it's kind of weird to me. Like, I'm a man of faith. Like, I believe in God. Like, I came home and I've had people send me nasty messages and they're like, I can't believe you're posting about God. I'm like, I just want to love you. Like, it's just my belief. Like, and I'm like, okay, here I am. And I had a
Not
friend
your
of mine.
people. Not your
Yeah,
people.
not your people. And I'm like, I had a friend of mine, and he's like, bro, just act like you've already been canceled. It's just so much easier just to be yourself and put your head on the pillow and be able to sleep at night, because it really, really is. And to your point, I think the freedom that people want, it's freedom of expression, freedom of self. And it's not everybody's going to want to live in your house. Not everybody's going to want to have dinner at your table, but you can still love them from afar and be respectful of them. And I love the point that you made too about how you handle those, like handling those from a place of self-respect and integrity, and not becoming a byproduct. Like, I coined this term for myself because like some of the posts you post will tickle me, but I say, if somebody's saying something to me or attacking me and my whole body is calm, it's not for me. But if you're
Yeah.
saying something to me and I'm like starting to get a little sweaty, my heart's racing a little bit, I'm like, oh, that tickles. There's like some semblance of truth
Yeah.
in what they're saying. And it's an
Yeah.
invitation for me to look at it. Like, where is that challenging me? Like, what do I disagree with? Like, why is that causing an emotional reaction in me? Because I think that's where I've grown the most, is like willing to look at the opposing view and the
Mhm.
opposing side. And if it creates emotional unrest in me, for me, it's like an invitation to go look in the mirror.
That's it. I'm always seeking knowledge. And, regarding politics, I consider myself a moderate that leans right. I would say I'm socially liberal, but business and fiscal and money, hard conservative. Like, don't mess with our money, especially as business owners. We should be thinking about that. Definitely capitalist. I don't want anything to do with socialism. And it's weird that there is actually some business coaches out there that are actual socialists that hide what they are, and they pretend they're capitalists, and they have their audiences fooled. But then you meet them behind closed doors, or you see their content or what they really think, and they're really just kind of borderline communists. And to me, those people shouldn't be teaching people how to build companies and scale companies and exit companies, because it's not even aligned with their core values.
Mm-hmm.
They want governments to do that for you and hand feed you. And so it's a lack of integrity when you discover that kind of stuff out there. The other way to apply this is the basis of comparison, because a lot of people listening, maybe they don't have the big audiences. They don't have the big following. Understand that what George and I are talking about our core values and our beliefs and attracting the right people, realize that not all audiences or followers are equal. And so you may look at some influencer's page and go, man, that person has 100,000 followers. Wow, I wish I had 100,000 followers. And you may be impressed by that number. But then when you start to look at the responses or the people that are actually following him, you may realize, like, I would not want to hang out with any of these people. I would not want to have dinner with these people. I would not want them at my house. I would not even want them in my audience. I wouldn't want them listening to my show. And so when you understand that, their following might as well be zero to you, because that's how much it matters. So don't always fall into the trap of just looking at numbers and being impressed and feeling like you're behind. Because really, I'd rather have 10 legit followers that cared and wanted to do things than 10,000 that were just fake and had nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you said that. And I don't talk about this often, but when I built Civilized Caveman, the food blog, like, I had 1 million combined social media followers. And
Mhm.
after having my come to Jesus moment and coming to life and giving that company away to Josh Trent, I deleted them all. That was the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, best thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I stayed off the internet for a couple of years. But when I came back, it wasn't millions. And I'm not like out here telling my team, like, oh, we need millions of followers. I'm like, no, 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 no. I want people at
No.
my dinner table. Like, I want to know who
Yep.
you are. Like, I want to have a conversation with you. And it's like, I think I say this all the time, that like perspective is the difference between your prison and your power. But like, to all those influencers and the businesses that I've had the pleasure of going behind, but also looking under the hood of so many of these things, the misrepresentations in the market, because they associate these things with their numbers. But then you'll have 1 million followers and they'll go to sell a t-shirt and not one person buys it. Or,
Yep.
there's this depth thing. Cause like, I look at some of your Facebook posts, I'm like, you have 400 comments on your personal Facebook feed. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that one tickled, like that one landed. And so I think it's a reminder to the depth. But I think now in 2024, I think values and beliefs is like the most underutilized, but not spoken, because people are like afraid to be themselves. But even when we're helping people hire teams, I'm like, the only thing you should be hiring on is values and principles, not skills, right? Like, if they don't think the same way or feel the same way, you're going to end up with pain down the road. And I think the same thing is in attracting audience or building your circle or hiring a
Yeah.
coach or posting content. Like, you have to have a semblance of like knowing who you are, and quite frankly, being unapologetic about who you are, being willing to grow and change your perspective, but also like having a sense of identity of like what you really stand for.
Let's add to that. Let's roll with that momentum. Definitely be yourself. Authenticity is high value, especially in a world with AI and a bunch of fake stuff and fake followers you can buy now for like 10 cents a follower, like fake stuff. Like, there's a lot of fakery going on. There's AI generated content. There's videos that are AI. Like everything's moving to easy and fake for all, like, to fool people, really.
Yeah.
So that makes authenticity actually more valuable, because there's more people that are, or less people doing it now are being transparent. So you and I agree on that. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Yes, be transparent. Yes, be yourself. These are all great, happy, happy, joy, joy phrases. But understand that there still has to be some entertainment value. If you're in marketing and you're trying to grow an audience and you're trying to do things to get attention, you can't just be a boring sack of mud and think like, I'm just being myself and I'm going to grow an audience. Like, no, you have to do interesting things. You have to live an interesting life. You have to challenge yourself. You have to do hard things. You have to demonstrate that you're willing to suck at something and showcase the entire journey of you sucking till you're mediocre, until you're kind of average. And maybe because there's no guarantee that you actually become good at it. And when you take people on these journeys over and over and over, they're going to start to go, hey, man, this is a person that thinks about a new objective, goes all in, even though they suck, shows us the failures, the hard parts, the falling down, injuries, like in some of the things I do. And then at the end, they're like, holy crap, he actually did it. And the holy crap, he actually did it part is what they're going to keep coming back to you for, because they're going to like, wow, this person just doesn't sit around on the couch. He just does. And it doesn't take a lot of money. Like some people are like, hey, well, Tony, I can't live an interesting life. I'm a dad or a mom and I got 2 kids, and all those are excuses, because if you were to say that, that means no parents out there have interesting lives, which is a huge lie. So it's a kind of a slap to the face that people that are parents, or whatever your excuse is, that they, if they can do it, you can do that. And so it doesn't take money. Just put yourself into different positions. Like you mentioned before we got on the show, with Elon's Starlink, you were able to go take that and sit out in the mountains and record some podcasts while looking in nature. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So think about like your video content. If we're walking around, if we're just doing it sitting in your living room on the couch, and everybody sees your messy house, it's probably not as good as you walking in nature and hearing birds chirping and interesting things going on in the background. Like you're thinking about marketing. So you always got to understand, like, there's got to be some entertainment or some kind of attraction, because this is marketing. It's not bullshit. You got to make yourself interesting. You got to do things that are challenging and take people on that journey and be willing to suck at things. And that's what inspires people and keeps them coming back, because they're always wondering what you're up to next. And that's what I do.
Yeah, I love that. I 100% agree. It reminds me of my buddy Tommy Casano, who is an incredible fitness trainer, right? But like thinking about how many of those are like a dime a dozen. And he's like, I want to do body weight. So he traveled to every national park in the country and in the world, and like stood at the top of Zion and stood in like Yosemite and like recorded them there. And I'm like, that alone, like you look at these things and it feels like a green screen, but like it's interesting. And I love that. I love that point of perspective, because it's storytelling. It's not over dramatization. It's just thinking about what's going to get somebody's attention. Because even in that world of like authenticity being the greatest currency, and there was a study done on this, that it resonates like 84 times more deeply than love itself anyways. But let me just throw this one out there. When you say, let me be authentic, you're not being authentic. So like, just be yourself and communicate that way.
I'm going to be real for a moment. Like,
Yeah,
oh, so you're not.
Or my favorite one, and I used to say this too, I'll own this. I used to be like, let me be honest. And then someone's like, have you been lying to me the whole time? And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that is so bad.
Say yes. Just go, yes.
Yes, I have.
I've lied to you this entire time.
And like living in this field of like understanding the rules of the game right now, whereas like there is a lot of fake and cheap and trying to trick people.
Yeah.
But in that game, it's an attention game. And so if you're authentic, you still have to play the game to get somebody's attention. It doesn't mean you have to be over dramatized or use false hooks or like bait and switch people, but you do have to inherently think about storytelling and how can I stand out? Like, how can I do something a little bit different? Like, I love how many people get mad at me when I'm in my car doing content, when I'm going down my driveway, 'cause it's like 15 miles an hour, but they're like, put your hands on the wheel. I'm like, no, my phone's mounted on a thing on my windshield and I'm driving down my driveway. And everyone's like, oh my God, but it's interesting to them because they're like, this guy's driving, he's going to crash but you got to just start to think about, and you made so many valid points that I think are invitations for people, because you can make anything interesting and bring anybody along for the journey, but you got to be willing to be yourself and then ask like, how can I wrap this? Or how can I show up like this to get somebody's attention?
Yeah, I like doing stunts. I like doing things that are just abnormal, things that are difficult, and doing the journey. I mean, you mentioned when I was 40, I started learning how to be a power lifter, and I could deadlift over 500 pounds, and in my 50s, and I started to think about that, and public speaking and getting on videos was very uncomfortable for me, and I had stage fright, and I joined Toastmasters, and I hired a speaking coach, and I did videos every single day, and the early ones really sucked, and it was the best I could do, but I knew that. But as people started to see progression over a short period of time, 3, 6 months, they started realizing I was getting better. I was improving because I was working with Toastmasters and speaking coach and doing the reps. I didn't have stages. I had a video camera in my phone. And so that was my virtual stage. And then I said, I'm going to write a book. And some people laughed. Some people I've known that are no longer my friends, they were like, oh, you think you're going to be an author now? And just people that just are kind of haters, closet haters, if you will. The book did really well, became number one, sold it over 10,000 copies. And so with the podcast, I mean, I remember some people like, oh, you think you need a podcast? Or you think you're going to be Joe Rogan? It's like, no, nobody's Joe Rogan. He's number one for a reason. But there's a reason that I have to have my message that I want to share with people. So I'm going to launch that podcast. And it's 6 years now, and it's been top ranked in the top 1% of all shows. So like I can go on and on, like comedy school. I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to improv comedy school. And everybody's like, oh, dude, that's hard. I was like, I know. And it took a year to finish, and I completed improv comedy school, and I've been on stage and did performances. And so all these things, the skateboarding in the 50s and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm skating bowls and half pipes and stuff now, and it's only been a year and a half.
Bro, I love that. There's so much wisdom underneath what you just shared of like just constantly stretching and
Yep.
failing in the process and being willing to document it. And to our point earlier, like having humility and
Yeah.
constantly iterating. It reminds me of like one of my favorite books by Michael Easter called The Comfort Crisis, which is like basically understanding and intentionally putting yourselves in these situations to grow. And it's an incredible book, but all of those points are so huge. And even to the Joe Rogan point, like yeah, Joe's number one and he deserves to be number one, but also like he did that podcast for like 4 years before anybody even knew it existed. And
That's right.
it was like, I want to get better at this. I want to make this. Like it's also who you become in the process and what you pick up from experience and lessons to be able to make those decisions faster and kind of know. Cause like I
Just
don't
be an interesting person. Like be yourself, but be your interesting self. That's the adder, right?
I love that. Yeah, I love that because I had a friend on the podcast who his portfolio of companies he manages is like $30 billion. And he's like, you want the secret to success? He's like, I've failed more than all of you, so I just know where not to step. And I was like,
There you
oh,
go.
and he's like, so I step faster and more in the right direction than most other people because I've walked down all those roads. And I think
That's
it's
right.
so
That's
profound. And
right.
even to what you shared earlier of like, there's those things that we love to do, but there's those things that get to be done that are that internal compass that tend to guide us and get us through that of like just constantly putting the reps in and being a almost being a student of our own work. And like
Yeah.
I think about this as a coach all the time. Like I'm asking people to do certain things and like I know this will get you there, but it doesn't absolve me from still doing those same things myself. Like
Yeah.
to your point
Agreed.
earlier, and I love that you said this, it's embodying the example, not spitting out iterations or coaching the example or talking about the example. It's like really like practicing what you preach. And I think it's such a powerful, profound, and the hard part for me is the simplicity of it. No matter how many times things get complicated, no matter how many businesses I've lost or gained back, when I sit there with myself, I'm like, I know exactly what to do. And the only reason I'm
Mm.
here is because I stopped doing it at some point. And now
That's
it's
it.
time to like kind of get back on the field. And I love that. So just a couple as we start to land this plane. I'm actually innately curious because we talked about like a ton of stuff, but like what are and I don't ask many people this, but I'm asking for myself selfishly, like what are some of your like favorite books that have had like an impact on you as like an entrepreneur, whether it's like state of thinking or business or personal development? I'm just innately curious.
A couple of years ago, I started going back to more of the classics and reading Greek philosophy and Stoicism and things like that, because a lot of the human problems that we have nowadays haven't really changed from those times thousands of years ago. And so, Marcus Aurelius Meditations is a good one. It's a thought
Great book.
journal that he wrote as he was thinking. It was kind of like his Twitter when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
He never thought people would see his thoughts, but he would have thoughts because he was a thinker, and he would just jot a thought down in the book. You read this and you go, wow, this is a very long time ago, and the same situations, the problems that he's facing back then are the same as we see today. So it kind of gives you a reassurance, like, hey, every problem I've had, someone else has already had, they've already solved. So there's a solution for my problem as well. Another classic book I think that everybody should read, and especially those of you that are parents, give this book to your kids too. How to Win Friends and Influence Other People by Dale Carnegie. I wish that book would have been something that they handed out in high school or made you read in high school, because it gave you so much more skills and awareness and tools to become more influential, become a better communicator, to actually have people listen, to build better friendships, better relationships. And, I think I read it for the first time in my late 30s. And then it's like one of those books I'll revisit every few years because I think it's a good book. And I think that should be like a mandatory book for everybody. So yeah, I think those are the two I would say that kind of stand out.
Yeah, I love both of those. And I had a friend, Garen Jones, on the podcast, and he gave the most sound advice to books that I've ever heard ever, because it got him out of a French prison that he was supposed to be locked up in like 11 years. He read The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Peale like a couple
Okay.
hundred of
Yeah.
times. And I was like,
Yeah.
what's your big takeaway about reading? And he said the mistake most people make when they read is they read the book to know it instead of reading the book to become it. And he's like, you shouldn't put the book down until you become the message in the book. And it was like one of the most profound things. And I'm due for a reread of Dale Carnegie's book because I have it and I love that book, and Meditations as well, because to your point, and even earlier, to like kind of land this plane, like as different as the wrapping paper might seem today, the challenges that we face, the perspective shifts that we face, like the things that are in front of us, somebody has had before, and they're all figure outable. It's just really about putting the work in, or having the right perspective or coach or guide or mentor to help you navigate that and really, put the recipe in the oven. And so I absolutely love those ones. And so for everybody listening real quick, because I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm really actually excited about this one. But I want everybody to check out Tony. Like you guys know, listening to the show, I'm pretty honest about what I consume and who I consume, and when I make recommendations. And Tony and I have been connected online for multiple years. And I finally asked somebody, I'm like, can you just text Tony for me and we do a podcast? And they're like, yeah, of course. And here we are today, and it feels so timely and perfect. But Tony's socials are really, really easy, and everything is all at 365driven.com. So the number's 365driven.com. His Instagram is 365 driven as well. And then his Facebook, which I highly recommend for your viewing pleasure, and also to see the embodiment of how he does this, because you'll see his life and his family trips to Italy and to Greece, and his cars and his perspective and his one-liners and his videos. And you can see the whole process as Tony Whatley. And so Tony, I always ask this question the same way, but I'm really curious about your wisdom, because you've been in this game for a long time and you had a lot of success and a lot of reps under your belt. And I also appreciate very publicly how you embody what you teach. Like, I go to my skate park with my son, and he's riding a scooter, and I see dudes out there skating, and like, he's like, Dad, take the scooter. And I like ate it so hard. And I'm like, maybe it is time for Dad to come play out here again and learn something new. And like, for you to pick up skateboarding at 50 and to have the success that you have, like, I appreciate the embodiment of all of this. And so I like to ask this question and say, like, imagine everybody listening got Men in Blacked and they forgot the entire episode. But in this moment, this is the only thing they're going to hear. And you have the ability to impart some tattoo wisdom that they'll take with them forever, whether it's perspective or a way to think about things or something to go do. What would your tattoo wisdom be for everybody listening?
I would say the most important part is getting your mindset correctly. I mean, even my book, the first two chapters are based on mindset and beliefs, and understanding the things that you may strongly believe, you should still question. You should understand, if I believe this, whether that's politics, religion, all the big questions, whatever you may believe, just realize that you started life as an empty vessel, and that you were programmed along the way, and that your belief, no matter how strong it is today in whatever subject it is, could have been 180 degrees shifted the other direction had you just been born with a different parent, different zip code, different country, maybe even a different sex. And so that kind of starts to make you wonder, what do I truly believe? And then you should challenge yourself to kind of go down that rabbit hole and go, okay, I believe this. I firmly believe this. The next question should be asking yourself, but does this belief carry to my goals in life? Where I want to be in life? Does this belief really benefit that, or does it really hurt my odds of getting to that? And then the next logical question should be, well, if I believe this so strongly, where did I pick this belief up? Where did I learn this belief? From who did I learn this belief? And start to identify, was there an agenda of why that person taught me this, or that book taught me this, or the experience taught me this? Is their agenda, is their lifestyle what I want to exemplify later on in my life? So go down the rabbit hole and try to figure out the core source of your beliefs and why you believe so strongly about things. And that makes you a better awareness thinker, because you start to realize a lot of the things that we believe, a lot of the things that we learned are actually the things that hold us back. And so we should spend quite a bit of time unlearning all the crap that we've been programmed with if it doesn't serve us, and learning to distance ourselves from people who no longer serve us, that aren't really supporting our journey or what we want to be when we become what we end up being. You got to learn to create some distance between those people. Not everybody's meant to go on your journey forever, and it's okay. And so always go back to mindset, and whatever you strongly believe in, be willing to change those opinions based on new evidence, realizations, data, information, experience, and be equally bold whenever you do make those decisions.
Yep. So I got to land this, because if we go back to the beginning of the podcast and talk about how more is the trap and people pay for success, I invite everybody to just save that section and put that section into practice, because that is worth its weight in gold, like to the absolute core. And so thank you for that answer. That was like a mini TED Talk in about 3 minutes, and I love it. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that you just nailed, that a very wise mentor said to me over a decade ago, and said, relationships happen for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and the choice isn't up to you. And I love what you just shared, because it is so profound, so tactical, and a massive awareness for people to have, because our beliefs drive our unconscious mind and create the results and the actions that we take. And so for everybody listening, like that last section, make that your morning alarm clock. If you make Tony your morning alarm clock, let me know so I can like screenshot it and send it to him. But that was absolutely huge and profound. And so just a couple reminders for everybody listening. If you resonated with anything, I would recommend that you put Tony into one of those buckets of people that you consume and surround yourself with, for perspective, for key takeaways, strategies. The things that he shares are incredible. So 365driven.com, 365driven on Instagram, and my personal favorite of where I eat my popcorn is on Facebook. So you'll find him at Tony Whatley on Facebook. And so Tony, I just thank you, man, from the bottom of my heart, for coming on, for saying yes, for spending this time with me and sharing all your wisdom and perspective, and being an example of all this stuff.
Honored to be here, brother. It's enjoyable, and I wish your audience well. And yeah, I hope you guys had some good takeaways. And I'd love to hear some feedback. I'm very approachable, and I'm not the kind of person that's going to be like, oh, I don't know who you are, I'm not going to respond. So yeah, hit me up on the socials, or especially Instagram or Facebook, and I'd be happy to answer questions or help you out.
Yeah, and everybody do that so I can socially peer pressure him into round 2 sometime in the future, because I
There you
could
go.
talk to Tony all day and we'll have another cup of coffee and do another one. And so, yeah, thank you, my friend. For everybody listening, the one thing I remind you of often, and I think this episode is a very poignant space to do this, is whatever landed, whatever tickled, whatever perspective shift you have, like, don't allow it to become shelf help. Like, take that thing and go practice it. Like, let today be the day. Let this be the permission slip you needed. But whatever landed, whether it's going to your beliefs, whether it's looking at how you deliver, whether it's the fact that you've been thinking about something for 10 years that you've wanted to try and you've been afraid to try it, like, go try it. Whether it's whipping out the camera and posting it, whatever that thing is that you're thinking and feeling in your body right now, to Tony's point earlier, your internal compass knows what to do. Get rid of the busy work and get into the being work, and like start taking action on those things today. And so we will see you guys in another episode. This has been another episode of My Crazy Mind of George. So whether you hear me in the next episode or you see me in your earballs, either way, we're out.